What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Jordan Morris. Welcome to the show.
Hey, hello, bro. Can I call you bro?
You can absolutely.
I
We're
will.
two bearded bros
We are. I
who
know.
dabble in comics.
Gorgeous beard on you, by the way.
Well, thank you. Yours is quite as well.
Do
We've
you
got
have an oil
the
you
nice
like?
length, a
Do you
little
have
bit
a
of salt and pepper.
shampoo you like?
So we're just going to talk about each other's beards all show.
Just
That's
beard
it.
talk. We're talking oils. We're talking shampoos. We're talking combs. That's right.
That's
Will we
it.
mention
Nothing else.
comics? Hell no.
Yeah. Also, don't steal my name then, because you are a man who likes comics and has a beard and is a bro. So,
You're right. You're right. I'll say this is actually my first beard. I have never. I'm kind of late to beard life, and I'm loving every minute of it.
well, it suits you well.
I've been reborn.
So, well, welcome to the show. If you're not familiar with Jordan, Jordan, you have a lot of podcasts out there, which are fantastic. You know, you appear a lot on Good Mythical Morning. You've done a lot of stuff out there in Hollywood with writing and things like that. But one of the reasons I want to talk to you is you have a new book coming out called Youth Group. You also are one of the creators behind the Eisner nominated Bubble. Uh, so much good stuff. So I
I
gotta
hate
ask
to
you,
correct you, but two Eisner
who?
nominations.
Whoa! So
Get it right. Do your no.
no, what was so it was best humor, right? It was up
Best
best
humor and best adaptation. Yeah, Bubble,
yes,
the sci-fi comedy, originally a scripted podcast. So we got that nomination
nice.
as well, and we're thrilled.
Yeah, as you should because it is great. So have you always been drawn to comics? Like growing up, did you like comics as a kid, or is this something new that you kind of fell into?
Yeah, no, since I was a kid, definitely. So I grew up in the 90s, so like read a lot of X-Men, read a lot of Spider-Man where he's fighting clones. And then like Archie, like we got Archies at the supermarket if we didn't pitch a fit. We got Mad magazines at the supermarket if we didn't pitch a fit. And yeah, those like comic parodies in Mad Magazine. I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of taught me to read comics, and definitely I'm kind of a comedy nerd too, so I like loved that stuff. And yeah, and I think I kind of like took a little break from comics in like high school when I felt like they weren't cool anymore. I think I was a little self-conscious to be seen with them. This was like before nerd stuff became cool
Before we were cool.
and people would make fun of you for reading a comic. I guess they might still now, but
They
you're
probably
more
still
likely
do.
to. Yeah.
There's just more of us out there vocally about it.
Right, exactly. And we have a place to complain on the internet about it if
Right.
we get teased. So yeah, but then I kind of like came back to it in college when I started getting like Mouse and Ghost World and all those kind of like comics of grown up type comics. And then yeah, then I just kind of like that started my interest back up again, and then I started more getting back into monthlies and rereading some of the stuff I missed when I was kind of on hiatus. And yeah, I've read them ever since. I've always loved them, and they always felt kind of impenetrable to me. Impenetrable meaning like the business side of it. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, well, this is not something I could ever do. Like I don't draw, so the idea that like I could somehow assist in the making of a comic seemed pretty out there to me. I like read some books on it, and I did like in my maybe late 20s like made some comics pitches with a friend that somebody maybe emailed to someone, but we got, negative silent response to yeah,
Yeah.
what's quieter than crickets? That's what we got. And so yeah, I'd kind of like given up on it a little bit and
Yeah.
always just thought it would be something like, well, I'll be a fan, but I'll never get to like participate. And yeah, and then kind of things changed in 2018-ish when I did a scripted podcast called Bubble. That was something I did with the Max Fun Network and a lot of great writers and creatives and actors. We did kind of a scripted radio play based on this script I had wrote about hipsters who live in this domed city in kind of the near future, and they have to fight aliens using this gig economy app, and they uncover this kind of corporate conspiracy, and there's blood and guts and gore and dick jokes and all that stuff. And yeah, so then I got a contact while that was coming out from Callista Brill over at First Second, a great editor, Callista Brill.
Mm.
And she said, like, hey, this I've been listening to this show and I think it would be a good graphic novel. And I've never said yes to anything quicker in my life. I was so excited to get that email. And then that kind of started the bubble train a chugging. And they let me write it with a great writer named Sarah Morgan, who had worked on the podcast. Sarah Morgan, a great writer and comics fan herself, and the artist by the great Tony Cliff, who I was just a giant fan of. He does a great series called the Delilah Dirk series.
Ooh.
Which is a kind of a YA adventure series about kind of an swashbuckling Indiana Jones type character. It's really, really fun. I loved those books and was such a big fan of Tony. The Delilah Dirk series actually continues on Patreon now. So if you were a fan of those,
Nice.
Tony's doing a new volume over on Patreon, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, so then we got to work together on that, and that was kind of what started it. And then I've gotten to do some other cool projects from there.
So, when you wrote this scripted podcast, Bubble,
Yeah.
you had no intentions of turning it into a comic in any form. You were just like, "Hey, this is what I want to do," and it was someone listening that was like,
Yeah,
"Let's
totally.
do this." That's got to
Yeah,
be such
absolutely.
a cool feeling for you as someone who was like loving comics growing up and
Yeah.
trying to break in, and then like, "Oh, I just can create other things, and then people are going to come to me."
Also, yeah, absolutely. It was so cool. And like the script is like the story is very comic booky, right?
Yeah.
There's aliens, there's robots, and there's mutants. So like I think just because I was writing it, or I shouldn't say I wrote all of it. I did a lot of the writing for Bubble, but there were a lot of good creatives involved in that podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it was kind of my baby, there was just a lot of comic book gunk in it because I love and read comic books. So yeah, I think it kind of just was accidentally suited for comics in a way that I didn't really realize when we were making it. But yeah, I love both versions of Bubble. I love the audio version and I really love the comics version. And I think like, they're pretty similar story wise, but I think they each have really special things about them that are unique to the medium that they're in. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just a good story with good characters, and I think it translates well to however you're ingesting it.
Yeah, and it's well, I was telling you, before we hopped on recording this, one of the things I like to try and do as, an interviewer is go back and look at other works and stuff. Like obviously when someone's on a podcast, there's usually a book that we're going to talk about, Youth Group,
Sure.
pick it up July 16th. But I always like to take in all the stuff that you create because I want to get to know you as a creator. And so I'll be honest, I checked out Bubble from the library and I was like, all right, let's see what this is. Halfway through, I got on Amazon and said, I got to order this because
Oh,
I was like, I'm going to
nice.
want it in my collection.
Yeah, sure.
And
You gotta have a copy
so
for the
it
house.
just is, I laughed. It was making me,
Oh, good.
humor is such a tough thing to do, I think,
Sure.
in any form, but for whatever reason, I find it really hard to find a good humor comic. And so like when I'm
It
reading
is.
something or a humor book and I'm laughing and it's a novelization or a story being told in some form and it's funny, I'm like, man, that just hits in all the right like things for me. So, I consumed it in comic form first, and now I'm going back and listening to the podcast and getting to hear the audio. It's so
Oh,
I'm
cool.
listening
That's
to it
great.
in
That's
reverse, but
great.
it still works.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm really glad to hear that. And yeah, I'm a comedy writer. I've written for like late night and for kids animation, and both of those things are very jokey. So I like putting jokes into things. And I know Sarah, who I wrote Bubble with, is also a writer with a lot of late night experience. And yeah, I think we're both kind of joke people. So we wanted to like pack it with jokes and gags and make it funny. And yeah, I think it is a little bit tough to do in comics just because like comedy has to do with timing and it has
Mhm.
to do with like performance. So making sure the characters are kind of like performing the joke properly and like you see people reacting properly. It can just be a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
And that is something I am really excited about with Youth Group, is I think that like Bowen McGurty, the great writer, or sorry, the great artist that I did that with, just really nails the acting of it, and the characters are so expressive, and like not only do you have someone saying something funny, but you have someone on panel reacting to that thing. And
Mhm.
I think that like it's just it's very small and it's hard to like pinpoint when it works and when it doesn't. But like I think it really works great in youth group and bubble. Like I think when you read a comic, you'll sometimes the art and the words will be at odds with each other in a
Mhm.
weird way. Like like if Thor says something funny, right? Like Thor's a funny character. Thor's great, and people like write great lines for Thor to say. And then it's like he'll be saying something funny, and then the image on the page will just be him like facing away from the reader, smacking a troll with a hammer. And it's like that art is beautiful and the joke is great, but they're not
They don't.
playing with each other. And like
Yeah.
part of that is probably just like mainstream comics. You got to crank those out. Like there's a timetable, they're on a schedule. Like sometimes you don't get to refine that stuff maybe as much as you would want to, but like yeah, I think the artist and the writer need to kind of know yeah, I don't know. They have to play well with each other,
Right.
and I think sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes like comedy suffers when it feels like one of those partners is not considering the other one.
Yeah. Well, it works in bubble and it works in youth group. And we've kind of mentioned it a couple times. But that's one of the reasons that we wanted to have this conversation is to talk about you have a new graphic novel coming out in July called Youth Group. Tell me about this book. Where did this story come about? And yeah.
Yeah, so it is a YA horror comedy. It is about teenage exorcists. They are part of a kind of goofy Bible study group, and they actually have to do exorcisms and fight demons. It's like a little bit Buffy, it's a little bit Shaun of the Dead, it's maybe a little American Werewolf in London. Kind of the horror stuff is taken seriously, but there's a lot of kind of funny characters and character-based comedy in it. Yeah, so I was a youth group kid. I was totally a youth group kid, and I grew up in Southern California. So like my youth pastor was a dude with tattoo sleeves who, sat backwards on the chair and wanted to rap about a pretty cool guy he knew named JC, who was pretty punk rock, if you ask me. And, we can worship God out on a surfboard if we want to, like one of these guys. And
Yep.
I always just like thought that was a funny world. It was funny, it was specific, it was kind of loaded with teen stuff because it was teenagers. So you have a lot of like teen feelings in those, like feelings, kids who feel like they don't belong and kids who feel like you have some like early romantic feelings kind of wound up in youth group. And so like I don't know. In the back of my head, I'm always just like, this is a fun world. And when you see it in media, I never thought anybody got it right. I never thought anybody got it right. It's always like too broad or maybe a little too mean or a little too like cartoony, like
Mm.
people, like if you see like teenage religious characters, they're always kind of like punchlines. And like I like those punchlines sometimes, right? They can be very funny, but I'm like,
Yeah.
this doesn't really get it. This doesn't really like understand what's funny about it. And so, yeah, I had always just kind of thought to myself, like, maybe I'll write something about a youth group one day. And then, yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know where the idea to make them do exorcisms came from, but like, I think it was just kind of a logical jump. Like I've always wanted, I like it, like I like injecting genre into things, and
Mm.
I'm like, how can I put a little genre in this youth group story? And so yeah, kind of horror was kind of sitting right there. A lot of a lot of spooky stuff in the Bible. You
Yes.
read that thing lately? A lot of spooky stuff.
Yes.
Ask a Catholic. Um, so yeah, that was kind of the germ of the idea, and I kind of just built out the world and characters from there.
Yeah. Well, it's funny as I was reading this, there was no doubt in my mind you experienced a youth group in the 90s at some
Yeah,
point in your life because
painfully
there are
obvious.
some deep cuts in there as they're like going to go, demon hunting basically and Jars of Clay is playing will fly.
Oh
Like I'm
yeah,
just like
yep.
I'm like that's a youth group kid, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
he
Mm-hmm.
he got he knew someone that was deep into that world and there is something about it, right? There are moments where you get that like when you look back at something in your life and you're like, oh man, that was cringe at moments, like
Sure.
of how the pastor was doing certain things. And I think that's a realistic thing of anything in our life. If we look at where we were at 10 years ago, 20 years ago in life, like oh, I did some cringy
Oh
things.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
this,
For
and
sure.
so
And yeah, and I think like I did want this to be a book that like anyone could read. Just like if you
right.
like spooky stuff, if you like funny stuff, I want people to be able to pick it up. But like I think if you were or are a youth group kid, there will be some familiar cringe in here.
Yes. And I think there's also, but like you said, is if you're not, that doesn't take away from the book. Like of if you haven't gotten to experience, that youth group world, like you probably have a gist of what would go on in it, and then you get to move along with the story pretty well.
Yeah.
So where did the team up then of, how'd you pitch it to, your artists and come along with
Sure.
putting this together?
Yeah, I pitched this to Callista Brill, who was the great editor behind Bubble, and yeah, I just kind of like told her that I had a new idea, and I kind of laid it out for her, and I did the pitch document, the kind of requisite comic book industry pitch document, and I sent it over, and she wanted to do it, and yeah, I'm very very grateful to her. I think she really helped shape it. I think that like my Hitch had it set in modern day and they had cell phones and they had social media and like I think Callista had the idea to set it in the 90s and I think that like what she was getting at was like I think she could tell that this was kind of a personal story that I was telling and I maybe didn't know it. I was like, it's a funny idea. What if these goofballs had to do exorcism? Ha ha ha. And so I think she's like, this is kind of like coming from a personal place. And then and she was totally right. I think when I read it back, I was like, oh, wow, this is like kind of personal. There's some personal stuff in here. And I'm writing about my childhood in a way that I hadn't really before. So yeah, I think she was really smart and like contributed, yeah, lots of great thoughts to it. And I also had a great day-to-day editor, Ben Wilgus. Well, I'll shout out Ben Wilgus, great comic book writer himself. Really like helped shape some of this and had a lot of like great ideas that are totally in the book. And then yeah, so I kind of sold them on the pitch and started writing. And then yeah, a couple months later, they're like, we think we have an artist we like. Check out Bowen McGurty. And I'm not familiar with Bowen, but they sent me over a great package of all Bowen's work, and I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely, go. No, I don't need to. We don't need to see anybody else. Go, lock it down, get Bowen, and yeah, and I'm just so glad that they found Bowen, and I'm so glad we teamed up because yeah, I think they just did such a beautiful job on the book.
Did you know, that when you were writing this, writing youth group, did you know you wanted it to be a self-contained YA graphic novel? Like, did you have ideas at any point of breaking it up in the smaller books, like a comic, or you're like, no, this is this way I want to tell the story from the get-go?
Yeah, I think like first, second, lucky for me are the first people I pitched it to, and they were the first, and they said yes. So I didn't have to like envision it as floppies or as a
Yeah.
web comic or anything like that, which I know the story probably would have been told a little bit differently if that was the case. But yeah, I know, first, second, they just do kind of self-contained graphic novels. So that was always kind of how I was envisioning the story. And yeah, and so I think because of that, I wanted it to be kind of seamless, like something you could read in one sitting if you wanted to. And yeah, I think it's like there's some stuff about it that's a little bit episodic. I think there's some stuff about Bubble that's a little bit episodic. So you could, I think you could do a world where you broke it up into monthlies, but yeah, I think with both of them, I think I wanted them to be, self-contained beginning, middle, end stories.
So was there a difference in the writing process for you? When you had Bubble it was written for being a comedy podcast
Yeah.
that was going to be a story. And I know you've done some work with some other floppies like Archie and some things like that. But when you brought this story to the table, was there a different mindset for you of knowing that you were writing this for a comic book form rather than any other medium when it came as a
Yeah.
writer?
Yeah, like with Bubble, there was like a learning curve. Like, I think something that Sarah and I instinctually did when we were writing the Bubble script is just like put in a lot of jokes. We're comedy writers, we were late night writers, and we're just like joke, joke, joke. Yes, that's that job, right? It's just like generating pages and pages of stuff, and maybe one or two of the things ends up on air. So I think when we kind of started seeing the art come back, it was like, well, these jokes are covering up the art, which
Mhm.
is, maybe honestly why people are picking this thing up in the first place. So like, I think we learned a lot about like self-editing and like picking our favorite stuff and only picking the stuff that advanced the story or the characters or like and I think we talked about how to tell stories differently. Like we have some wordless scenes in Bubble, and I think with youth group, I kind of learned some of those. I took some of those lessons to that project. I'm like, all right, like people are going to want to see this thing. I have a great genius drawing it, so I better like give them interesting things to draw and make sure that I'm not like overloading them with big junky sentences that don't go anywhere. So yeah, so I think like considering that people are going to be looking at this thing too is very important.
Yeah. So you have stuff of, Bubble being a two-time Eisner nominated comic.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure, like, there are people who do interviews that don't do their full research and will only call something a one-time Eisner nominated. So I want to make sure I put it out
No,
there.
no.
So, did that change for you of like getting the Eisner nomination? Did it open up doors for you as a writer then to step into, comic book writing a little bit more and get to experience the world that you love so much?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Eisner nomination is what helped the Archie folks decide to take a chance on me. I think I knew Jamie Ratante, my editor over there at Archie Comics, great Archie editor and a great Archie writer herself. We just kind of knew each other from the internet. We like goofed around on Twitter together, and like, yeah, I think like I had made it very clear to her that like I love Archie and would love to write an Archie if you ever had a assignment for me. And like, I think it is hard to sell your bosses who have this legacy media property on a writer who doesn't have any comics credits with these beloved characters. So, I think that like I don't know for sure, but maybe my guess is that like once we got that nomination, it was a little bit easier to sell. Like, hey, this guy's done comics before, and
Yeah,
he's he's done a comic that's done well, so you can take a
we
shot
can,
with it with
right.
him. So yeah.
Was there a moment of like kind of like, oh, surrealness, as you mentioned earlier, like you were a kid picking up Archie comics at the store, and then like, now you got to work on an Archie comic.
Totally. Oh yeah. Oh, surreal like great. And my mom loved it too. My mom was like, "You're writing Archie," and I'm like, "It is the ones where they get killed. It is the horror ones where they get their heads chopped off. But it is Archie and the gang." So yeah, it's awesome. I'm just so like excited that I got to do it, and I love how they turned out.
Yeah. And so youth groups coming out this summer.
Yes.
What is it that you would want to, like, if people are like, I don't know about this, like what's your sell? Like, you got to check it out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like if you like spooky stuff and funny stuff, something for everybody there. And I think that there's some YA fun in there too. There's like a little bit of romance. There's friendships blossoming and being tested. So I think if you like that kind of soapier stuff, there's some stuff in it for you. And yeah, and I would just ask you to look at the beautiful art of Bowen McGurty. We have a little link, bit.ly/youth group book. You can see the cover, gorgeous cover. And yeah, read a couple of the initial pages and get some of those pre-order links there. So yeah, I think if you like some spooks with your ha-has, youth group is the book for you.
It's so good. You do a lot of writing, but you mentioned Archie, you mentioned, youth group here. Do you feel more comfortable writing in the YA space, or is this just something that you're like, this was a story that felt right for that world?
Yeah, I think that like I read an interview with Ryan North, great comics creator Ryan North on writing YA. I think he had his I don't know if this is his first YA thing, but I think he was doing an interview to promote a YA thing that he had written, and I think his his take on like what makes YA was just that like nobody swears and everybody leaves their clothes on. And I think that like with those two things in mind, like it's storytelling. And I think that like great characters are great characters and like great stories are great stories. So like there are some parameters. I think that like if 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 teen characters are the focus, then your thing can be YA pretty easily.
Right.
So yeah, I think that like you have to think about it a little bit, but like not a lot. I think it was something that I thought about, you know, of the things that I devoted brain space to creating youth group, like is this YA was pretty low on the list. And I think just
Yeah.
like yeah, telling a good story that I would like to read. Because yeah, I think that like in this world, and I think especially with comics readers, like you do read a lot of stuff that is kind of all over the map with who it's pitched at, right? Like I enjoy Spider-Man comics, and also a 13-year-old can enjoy the exact same
Right.
Spider-Man comics because that's how that's like storytelling is good and sophisticated now, right? Like
Yeah.
I think the stuff that is made for all ages is really made with a lot of TLC, and yeah, I hope that Youth Group is that. I hope Youth Group like actually is something that a teenager could read and have fun with and see themselves in, but also just yeah, if you're like a Buffy fan, if you're a former youth group kid, if you yeah, like exorcisms and teen feelings, like I hope people will check it out if any of that stuff sounds
Yeah,
appealing.
well, and it seems like it seems like a natural fit because if you ever were in youth group or something, it was when you were in a teen, like, and
Yeah.
so like it fits into it naturally that even if you are reading this now as an adult, like your mindset, like you said, your editor, it can become more of a personal story because it felt personal to you of like putting it in
Sure.
the 90s, not necessarily a modern day a world. And you have this just wonderful blend, like you said, we've talked a lot about with the humor in here, but there are some horror elements that you go, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen. Like it's,
Yeah.
like, and there's, there's a lot of emotional arcs here with the characters. And so, for you as a writer, how do you get into the voice of your characters that you want to then have them tell the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think with me, when I am doing something for myself, not for myself, but I guess maybe if I'm doing a project that's kind of my baby, right? Like not
Yeah.
writing for somebody else's TV show or somebody else's comic. Um, I think when I'm making new characters out of whole cloth, I just base them on people I know. Like that's just my starting point for every character is I'm like, who in my life is funny and interesting? And I kind of just use them to start the character. And like I think the characters become their own person as you write, and I think they change and grow and I don't think they're ever just like one to one. Like there's that guy I know. It's like you kind of start with some of their qualities, some of the things that you think make them funny or interesting, and you kind of just go from there and you kind of let them become their own character and see where they go as the story progresses. So yeah, I think that's kind of my hack for creating a new character is just like who in my life is funny and interesting. And with youth group, like it was just kids I went to youth group with. Like all those kids are just like somebody I knew, and that's kind of the germ of the character. And I think they end up in different places. So I don't
Yeah.
know if you went to youth group with me and read this, you would go, "That's me." But like that was definitely how I started the characters.
I hope someone on Twitter someday is just like, oh my goodness, I went to youth with Jordan.
Yeah,
I'm this
that'd be great.
character.
Please get in
Uh,
touch.
yeah. So, well, Jordan, I want to respect your time. I know you are a busy person. Where can we mentioned it comes out in July. Where can people get youth group? How can they get it?
Yes, absolutely. So you can pre-order this gorgeous new book anywhere you get your books, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I'm going to take a wild guess and guess that if you are listening to the show, you have a local comic book store that you frequent. So yeah, if you have an LCS that you love, definitely ask them to put it on your pull list. Ask them to pre-order it up for you. Helps us, helps them, and yeah, usually with those pre-orders, if people get a couple of them, they might order a couple extra copies, and I think that's how more people find the book. So, yeah, definitely give us a pre-order wherever you're buying your books. But yeah, if you're already stopping into the LCS, please give us a pre-order there. But yeah, you can find that all at bit.ly/youth group book. You can again see Bowen's gorgeous cover and get a bunch of links. You can read a couple of pages and yeah, and hey, it looks like I'll be at San Diego Comic-Con and a couple other Comic-Cons this year, later this year. So please find me, say hi, get a book signed. It would be cool to meet you.
Yeah, and if you see Jordan and you listen to this podcast, make sure you tell him that you like his beard just not as much as mine.
Yes, so tell me it's the second nicest beard you've ever seen, and I will know. I will know you listen to this
wait a second, you listen to that podcast.
Yes, that'll be our secret code.
So, but and hopefully, if you're listening to this podcast, you have an LCS. And we talk about this all the time. Go pre-order books. It helps your shop. It helps the creators. It helps the publishers know what people are wanting, and it's a beautiful thing. And if it's something that you love, pre-order it. Come on, like put it on your pull list because that just helps everything. So Jordan, all the links that you mentioned of where people can find this are going to be in the description of this video, or if you're listening to the podcast, in that description as well. Do you have anything else that's going on that you want to promote, talk about? Obviously, youth group. Obviously, if you haven't read Bubble either, go back and pick it up. It's fantastic. Anything else that you're working on that you're creating that you want to let people know about?
Yeah, but yeah, Bubble's still out there. Still very funny. You can also get that anywhere you buy your books. Yeah, I'll focus it up and just focus on the books. I do have a website, jordanmorris.net. You can go there, get your book links there, and if you want to know about podcasts and some other stuff I'm involved with, jordanmorris.net. But yeah, youth group.
Absolutely, get youth group. So, is the website the best way to stay in contact with you, or hop on socials or things like that?
Yeah, jordanmorris.net. If you want to, you'll find social links there. You'll find contact form if you want to bother me via email. Love to get bothered via email. So yeah, that's a lot of fun stuff over there at jordanmorris.net.
That's the best. So gang, I highly recommend checking out Youth Group. If you listen to this conversation, I think you should be sold. Again, check out Youth Group. Go back, check out Bubble. I read it and I'm now listening to the podcast. Do the same. We can have a journey together, gang.
There you go. Yeah.
A little bubble journey.
A journey with friends, much
That's
like
right.
Frodo and Sam did up to Mount Doom.
I don't know what Mount Doom is in this scenario, but we'll just say it's not ordering Youth Group as Mount Doom. So
there you go. Yes, we're all doomed.
If you don't order it, so pre-order Youth Group right now. Gang, it's been a lot of fun, Jordan, just talking with you about comics and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're listening or watching, make sure you go pre-order Youth Group. You're going to enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. With that being said, though, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.